Creepypasta Time. I was sent to receive a distress call from Watchtower 1. What I've seen there has haunted me for life. The Deepwater Horizon was one of the biggest man-made disasters in the world, holding the infamous title for being the largest environmental disaster in the history of the U.S., ever since its fatal explosion in the Gulf of Mexico, 41 miles offshore from civilization. What they don't tell you is that the Deepwater Horizon, caught in one of the worst disasters the world has seen, wasn't the only one like many others recorded in the documents and files, known to the press and public. For highly classified and non-disclosure agreements that I've signed, I am expected not to be revealing this publicly. Unfortunately for me, I do not have much time left in this world. Recently, I have been diagnosed with a stage 3 lung cancer from specialists and doctors alike, with the excessive heavy smoking that I had picked up as a stress reliever to get away from the memories and nightmares that had been plaguing me ever since the damned search and rescue operation to Watchtower 1. Speaking of which, Watchtower 1 wasn't the original name for the oil rig, as they had changed its name several times to avoid whistleblowers. As such, I, unfortunately, cannot disclose the true identity of the facility to avoid those who poked their noses into the operation that I had longed and yearned to forget. This is purely my recount and a guilt reliever to get the weighing matters off my chest before I leave this god-forsaken world for good. You see, on November 4, 2018, I joined the CDC, also known as the Centers for Disease Control, with the mindset and pretext that I would be evading curing diseases, giving medical attention and training and serving in the military, so I was pretty well suited for the job. The third field assignment that I had received earlier came with skepticism, codenamed Operation Hammer It Down. Alongside with my team of 5 personnel in total, consisting of 4 security officers and me, was supposed to receive a distress call coming from an offshore deepwater oil drilling rig, aka known as Watchtower 1 at redacted, in the Atlantic Ocean, approximately 39 miles off the coast of, data expunged, to rescue and secure 2 geneticists and the rest of the rig personnel who were on board the rig at the time of a seemingly aggressive encounter with unresponsive mutilated figures coming on board the platform from the vessel, that has been seen to have fatal injuries covering the entirety of their bodies, exhibiting rabid and hostile behavior in terms of jerky and shuffling motions towards the crew. Those who had tried to establish physical contact with the figures have been seen to also exhibit sudden violent and aggressive tendencies within a couple of minutes, and therefore have been quarantined and separated from the rest of the crew on board. The massive scientific research vessel had coincidentally crashed into the drilling rig during a hurricane-like storm in the sea at 2210 p.m. hours, and had gotten stuck and lodged into the pillars, as documents and recorded information about the call states. The distress call came in at around 0000 hours, 12 a.m., as the connection had abruptly halted from unknown reasons, possibly from the storm itself. Gearing up my issued equipment and loading a fresh magazine into the M4 carbine, I strapped and tightened the bulky black tinted gas mask around my face as I donned a heavy yellow rubber hazmat suit, with an accompanying tactical vest at the outside, strapping considerable lengths of heavy-duty duct tape around my wrist and legs, and sealing them up to prevent air from entering and escaping. I exited the decontamination chamber drenched in the cleansing tap water and the heavy downpour of the rain, as the roar of the Black Hawk helicopter greeted me as it resonated throughout the slippery landing pad, with occasional thunder that boomed in the distance. The rest of the security team waved to me, all clad in the same yellow protective suits, sitting in their respective seats. Upon boarding the helicopter, the ground crew outside gave the helicopter one last exterior check before giving an all-clear thumbs up to the pilot and co-pilot, before shutting the metal door in a quick and swift slam, locking it into place. Torrent of raindrops the size of bullets pelt the top and sides of the helicopter vigorously, sounds of their impact drowned out by the blade of the helicopter as it gradually hovered above the ground before taking off. Call signs, background static and garbled voices chattered over the communications radio built into our hazmat suits, as the shaky chopper ride to the oil rig was carried out mostly in silence, apart from the constant droning of the radio and the howl of the helicopter blades. I thought that our weapons would protect us. I thought that this mission was just a simple extraction operation. I was so fucking wrong. Rudely stirred from my short power nap by the shrill announcement of the pilot implying our arrival, the helicopter shuddered against the force of the unrelenting downpour of rain. Stealing a glance at the electronic clock hanging on the wall of the helicopter, it read in brightly lit red numbers, 3:23 a.m. The exterior window of the helicopter is covered in a thick layer of water, as the world outside the helicopter is shrouded in a vast, thick and black void, with nothing except the mesmerizing wave-stricken ocean for as far as the eye could see through the dense curtain of rain. Pilot, Vulture 222, platform coming into view. Feet dry in 20 seconds. The surrounding void of darkness engulfing the sea gradually became brighter and brighter, as a massive behemoth of a structure seemingly rising out from the sea, came into view outside the blurry water-splattered window. Pilot, we have a non-visual status on personnel in the rig, break. The words came over the radio, slow and drawn out as the helicopter circled around the brightly lit drilling rig, with a massive visible black reefer vessel half sunken and stuck into two of the oil platform pillars, causing it to slightly bend and tilt over to an unstable angle. My jaw hung agape as another unsettling image of the rig soon came into view, this time at the landing pad. The offshore helicopter, used to transport personnel from the shore to the rig, is seen sprawled flat on the landing pad, wreck tail dangling over the edge, and the body of the rest of the helicopter torn to shreds with the chopper's blade hanging loosely at its side. A fogged-up gas mask, obstructing most of my view. Swiftly sliding down the rope as my boots slammed onto the metal platform, I quickly drew the M4 assault rifle and switched the safety off, as I noticed my other two teammates who were already in position, assault rifles trained on a rusty metal steel door a couple of feet away. Sounds of sliding and boots hitting the wet ground can be heard behind me, as the other two squad members, Corporal Staples and SPC Maxion rendezvoused with us, assault rifles crackling and clicking into place, as the whole team filed into combat stance, weapons drawn at the ready. Co-pilot, Whiskey 3, this is Vulture 2-2 at Bingo Fuel. We're bugging out of here for refuel and resupply. Godspeed, over. The helicopter hovered above us for a second before rising up and circling the rig for another minute, before soon flying back into the distance, the sounds of turning blades quickly disappearing and masked by the incessant pitter-patter of rain and thunder. The surroundings around me were grimly lit by the overhead lights of the rig as a loud, stressed groan of the infrastructure echoed throughout its walls and floors. Sarge raised his hands and motioned for us to toggle the flashlights on our guns to operational, as he took the lead and walked towards the metal door, with the rest of the team still vigilant and following after him. Approaching the worn-down and corroded metal door, we stepped aside and divided ourselves into two sections, each on either opposite sides of the door and pressed against the grime-coated wall, awaiting further instructions. Breathing heavily through the fogged-up mask, I could still make out the palpable lingering smell of decay and decades of rusting metal as the platform squeaked noisily under our weight. Sergeant Volker's motioned a countdown with his gloved hand, mouthing the numbers whilst causing one of the team members trailing behind us, SPC Maxion, to bend over and gag, as he uses his assault rifle as leverage to keep him from falling over. Jesus Christ, what in the world actually happened here? SPC Maxion remarked through the radio, the distinctive sounds of his coughing mixed with the fuzz and the white static emitted from through the speakers. Clenching the weapon tight in my hands, I shone the flashlight attached to the barrel of the gun onto an unlit section in the corridor, with the beam of light falling upon a frame of a person dressed in a matching orange reflective tape jacket and pants, lying against the wall. I momentarily stopped in my tracks as I stared in shock at the scene that lay in front of me, dread gripping tightly at my sides. Figures spotted, 11 o'clock. I briefly announced, stepping towards the figure, weapon still drawn and aiming down at it with the barrel flashlight. Advancing forward towards the person, I had noticed that the surrounding walls and floors that he is lying in are coated in a sticky, crimson-red liquid, and the sickly smell of blood growing more and more concentrated, the lingering and oppressive feeling of dread growing more and more densely in the pit of my stomach the closer I stepped, the sounds of my boots softly clanking against the floor. The rest of the team stuck behind, guns trained on the body. "Sir? Are you alright?" I kneeled down and gripped his shoulders as I gently shook him, the rifle clutched in my other hand. No response. As I slowly tried to lift up his face, I held one gloved hand around his chin for better support as I repeated my question. "Sir? Do you holy fucking shit?" I recoiled backwards in disgust and terror, letting go from his chin as he limply slumped back forward. Howls can be heard coming from the other side of the door, as soon as I tried to jiggle the handle for the second time. I flinched by instinct as the whole team jolted, weapons trained on the door. But as soon as the chilling screams and howls resonated throughout the corridor, it had stopped as quickly as it had started. "Hello, miss? Please respond, we are here to help you," I shouted through the metal, holstering my weapon as I cupped my hands against the door to amplify my voice. My pleas for a verbal response came empty-handed, as the muffled sounds of shuffling feet and slow metal scraping against the floor could be heard from the other side. "Shit, we've got to help her. She might be injured," Corporal Jackson said beside me, stepping forward as he lifted the barrel of his rifle and aimed in the direction of the metal handle. Breach. 4 quick and loud gunshots ring out from the muzzle of his barrel as it illuminated the cramped corridor surroundings around us in dazzling bright yellow flashes, as sparks fly from the handle itself. The heavy metal door swung wide open after 2 consecutive kicks, and we quickly filed into the pitch-black cafeteria through the doorway, breaths panting as the beams of light from our weapons shook around violently in our hurried states. As we fully composed ourselves and calmed down, the entire cafeteria became eerily quiet and silent. Apart from the muffled thunder outside and our breathings through the masks, we scanned our flashlights around in the pitch-black room, in search of the source of the screams that came earlier. I was still breathing heavily through my mask, the steam from my breaths quickly blocking and limiting my view from the eye holes. The whole room was deathly silent for a full minute, with nobody saying a word with bated breaths. We stood in our positions and used the narrow beam of our flashlights to scan around and illuminate the surroundings, as the light fell over a scene of broken tables, twisted metal chairs and shattered coffee mugs. Suddenly, quick dozen flashes of motions were caught in the corner of my vision as I jerked around with my flashlight, trying to get a glimpse of whatever was in the same room as us. The beam of my flashlight shone around wildly, as I shone the light from one spot to another, where I had last seen the movements. "Hello? Is anybody there, SPC?" Maxion announced loudly into the room, but before he could finish his sentence, his entire body was abruptly caught by a darting figure lunging onto him from behind, and propelling both of their bodies forward into the darkness, causing him to drop his M4 assault rifle onto the floor and killing the flashlight from the gun. "Help me! I can't see! Get it off of me!" His cries for help screeched in the pitch-black distance, as suddenly, deafening sprays of gunfire erupted from my right, as another one of my fellow teammates, Corporal Jackson, opened fire blindly in the general direction of a sudden figure that had dashed past his beam of light. "Contact!" he quickly yelled, as Sergeant Volkers and Corporal Staples started wildly opening fire as well, on several other figures that had quickly run past their lights, causing the entire cafeteria to momentarily light up in a blinding mixture of yellow and white flashes. Time seems to crawl to a halt as I blanked out in the heat of the moment, the gunfire flashes irradiating the attacking figures, as I caught a glimpse at their misshapen, malformed bodies, similar to that of a burn victim, with brownish-red spittle flying out from their jaw that hung at an unnatural angle. "What are we fighting?" Corporal Staples yelled in panic whilst blindly shooting, as his entire body was abruptly grabbed onto and yanked forward into the darkness, his desperate screams for help muffled in the deafening background gunfire. "Snap out of it! We've got to get the hell out of here!" Sergeant Volkers yelled from the left, as he started sprinting back towards the metal door, with Corporal Jackson hot on his heels, turning around for the last time and firing back into the inhuman screeches and howls of the figures. There I stood, both feet frozen to the ground in shock and fear from the events that had unfolded right in front of my eyes, as the gruff command from the sergeant snapped me out of my dazed trance. I considered helping my other 2 teammates for a second, before silently uttering an apology and ran after Jackson and the sergeant, back through the metal doorway. Howls and angry animalistic screams bounced off the corridor, as the huge metal door vibrated and held under the bashes and attacks that came from the other side. I was on my knees, panting and breathless as I clutched the rifle, my hands trembling in terror. Sorry. We passed the previous body lying against the wall in a running sprint and climbed the metal stairs, reaching back onto the top side in mere minutes. Slamming the metal door shut behind us, a distant rumble of explosion resonated and echoed throughout the rig, as the entire platform started to gently shake, seconds after the blast. "Fuck!" Corporal Jackson yelled furiously through the suit, as he kicked the oxidized metal wall beside us, causing it to slightly dent in from the impact. Their fucking deaths could have been prevented. We might have come up with something else if it wasn't for my goddamn idea to breach in. No, you did the right thing in trying to save whoever that was behind the door. That was the original mission for the entire team. I tried to assure and emphasize with him, as the sudden loud clack of the onboard PA system reminded both of us that the mission wasn't over just yet. Hello? Is this the rescue team? We're currently holed up and trapped in the control room. There's a couple of those things trying to break in. Upon hearing the announcement from the system, Corporal Jackson and I glanced at each other, exchanging subtle nods before taking off, jogging towards a metal doorway further down the platform, this time with a directory map nailed to its sides with faded description labels. I briefly scanned over and examined the directory with my gloved fingers, as it unconsciously trailed down and pointed to a small location in the map which has an accompanying label that reads, "Control Room, over there." Corporal Jackson exclaimed, catching my attention as he motioned his fingers to point in the direction of a woman clad in a white lab coat, waving at us from a window situated in a sizable second-story tower. As we hastily made our way to the giant platform tower, the radio built into both of our suits suddenly burst to life, beeping in a quick and rhythmic manner. Whiskey 3, this is Vulture 2-2 on maximum fuel. We'll be on station for evac in 8 to 10 minutes, out. I sighed in sheer relief as Corporal Jackson grinned from the inside of his mask, as we reached a smashed and warped metal door, leading into the tower. "I'll take the lead, watch my 6," he muttered as we ascended a spiraling grated stairwell, with remnants of bloodstains and tiny pieces of decomposing flesh littering the metal, both floor and walls. The distinct sounds of banging, blood-curdling screaming and howling soon came into focus as we neared the top of the stairwell, as I tightened the grip on the handle of the rifle. As we rounded the corner in the spiraling stairwell wall, we could make out a couple of figures, back turned towards us as they continued their relentless rampage on a metal door, with visible damage and denting on its exterior. The figures, clad in the same working orange uniforms and construction helmets, are seen aggressively and violently bashing their heads into the body of the door, as one is seen repeatedly running into it with his body at full force, crimson red blood spilling all over the place and white dips of ribcage bones protruding from his back as he continued with the act as if nothing has happened, whilst screaming and howling frantically. "Jesus Christ, what the fuck?" Corporal Jackson whispered, as the figures abruptly stopped in their actions and spun around faster than we could react, as Several loud knocks. "Open up. We're with the CDC," I called out, lowering my weapon as I motioned for Corporal Jackson over to me. Sounds of unlocking could be heard from the other side, as the door slowly inched open, leaving a tiny gap, as an eye peeked out and examined me and Corporal Jackson before swinging wide open, revealing a dark-haired female scientist dressed in a blood-stained lab coat, her hair ruffled and disheveled. Behind her sat a rig worker, clad in the same dirty orange uniform and looking quite rather exhausted. "Thank God you guys had finally arrived. We hunkered down here in the control room when the rig went into lockdown. My other partner went out and made the distress call at the comms room. But he hasn't returned since." Corporal Jackson shot me a pitiful glance, as we both knew that deep down, he was already dead. "You're the working geneticist scientist, right?" I curiously inquired, as she confirmed the statement by nodding her head. "The evac helicopter should be here anytime soon to get you guys out." "Weehaw!" My words were quickly muffled out by a roar of a colossal explosion resounding and bounding off the walls, as the entire control room shook violently, throwing us off our feet. Mugs, keyboards, computer monitors clatter and smash to the floor around us, as the lights suddenly went out. The room shakes once more as the facility fire alarms start blaring. The wailing of the shrill alarm echoes all throughout the vicinity, as we laid on the debris-stricken floor, groaning and moaning in pain. Our radios screamed to life as a familiar voice blared through the speakers, vibrating from the intensity. "Vulture 2-2 is at the station and in position. We have confirmation visuals of flames on the rig. Get your asses out of here before this place blows us up." The scientist groaned as the rig worker stumbled to his feet, holding onto the control panel before he smoke. Another smaller explosion resonated beside us from a distance, sending parts and fragments of the catwalk hurtling down onto us from above, as we covered and shielded our heads with our arms and hands. The lingering scent of copper and melted wires penetrated our gas masks and into our noses, as we ran through the thick black smoke, following Corporal Jackson as he led us to a splitting intersection in the catwalk. A distinct and muffled roar of a helicopter could be heard above the sounds of chaos. "This way. Go. Go. Keep moving," he called out whilst dodging the fires, as the massive derrick crane of the oil rig groaned loudly under stress, tilting inwards and coming crashing down onto the control tower that we had been in earlier. Had we not left it earlier, we might have been squashed like bugs. The impact of its crash came with the result of the platform tilting even dangerously to one side, as we were once again thrown off our feet, this time thankfully holding onto the catwalk handrail. "How far is it to the helicopter?" the worker shouted in frustration as he ran in front of me, mouth and nose covered with his arm to prevent inhalation. "We're almost there. Move. Move," Corporal Jackson shouted angrily, as the whirring of the helicopter rotor blades came into focus. The smoke parted, as I could see the military helicopter in all of its magnificent glory, hovering just over by the edge of the platform. Doors slung wide open as the pilot directed the bird closer to the edge, its sides scraping against the paint of the catwalk. "Get to the chopper," the radio screamed as we ran towards the helicopter, with Corporal Jackson being the first on board, followed by the geneticist and the worker. I was about to board the helicopter when I was suddenly thrown backwards with the catwalk breaking apart and bending into two, as the massive rig tilted into an angle which I was now meters away from the helicopter. Departure as the helicopter flew away from the rig, leaving behind the stricken oil rig as it commenced its final explosion in the last few seconds, sending out a blinding bright light and a massive mushroom-shaped cloud of detritus and rubble as it broke away, slowly sinking into the stormy ocean. It has been 19 years since the dismissal of the offshore disaster as a freak accident, the government covering up the whole story as just a malfunctioning drilling system going awry on board. I left the CDC and my whole life back there behind for good, given the NDA slip that has kept my mouth shut and prohibited me from even hinting at the existence of the story. My contract has already ended 4 days ago, and I had been debating whether to reveal the story or not from there ever since. Some things in the world are just not meant to be discovered, and we should just remain blissfully unaware of the hidden dangers that lurk in our very planet. I just hope in my heart that the poor souls on board the rig during that fateful night rest in peace under the sea, alongside with Sergeant Volkers, SPC, Maxion and Corporal Staples. That is all that I have for you. And whatever that you do, please don't go searching for Watchtower 1.